Is this the end of OnlyFans? As you may be aware, there is an active class action RICO lawsuit against OnlyFans and a handful of OnlyFans management agencies right now. I've seen a ton of buzz and anxiety about this lately from OnlyFans agencies and models that are worried that they might be open to future legal action, or worse, that OnlyFans itself might be financially obliterated by this suit and forced to shut down. I have read over 100 pages of court documents and related case law so that you don't have to. And in this video, I'm going to cover 3 things. First, I'm going to set the stage and discuss the parties in the lawsuit, the current status of the case, who's filing it, and who's being sued. Second, I'm going to discuss the actual charges and claims being made, and how likely it is that those claims are to stick and go to trial based on the facts of this case and similar or precedent case law. And third, and most importantly, I'm going to discuss whether or not you, as an OFM agency or model, actually need to worry about this lawsuit. Plus, how you can protect yourself from any future legal fallout and reduce the likelihood of future legal action from being taken against you. I'm going to caveat all of this with, I'm not an attorney, and this video is not legal advice. The information that's shared here is based on publicly available sources and is accurate to the best of my knowledge at the time of this recording, which is September 25th, 2025. Any discussion of potential outcomes is just my opinion, not a prediction. And if you need legal guidance, please consult a qualified lawyer licensed in your jurisdiction and not a YouTube video. Before I get into it, if you are an OnlyFans agency owner, model, fan, or any other kind of professional in the digital intimacy industry, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Intimate Underworld is the single best source on YouTube for news, guides, and interviews with thought leaders in the OnlyFans and digital intimacy ecosystem, and our goal is to provide the best content for entrepreneurs in this space, bar none. Additionally, if you want to see the sources for all of the information that I'm going to go over in this video, I provided a link to a Notion page that contains every single document that I reference. Now, on to the video. Part 1. The stage and the players. First, it's important to understand that this case is being filed in the United States, specifically in California, and it's currently in pre-trial motion. I'm not going to go into a long lesson about the American court system here, but the way that American civil courts work is that basically anybody can sue anybody, and every lawsuit has to go through a series of steps before it actually goes to trial in order not to waste the court's time for frivolous and unsubstantiated claims. For instance, you could file a lawsuit against me for accidentally stepping on your shoe. But when we present that case to a judge, the judge can determine that the lawsuit is not justified and that it would not be prudent to continue. I'm oversimplifying all of this for the sake of not wasting your time, but basically every case goes through roughly 7 steps before a trial actually even happens. You can pause here and read them if you want, but it's not all that important to what we're going to discuss today. As you might suspect, that means that there can be a very long time between when a suit is filed and when the trial actually occurs, assuming it occurs at all. I say all of this because this case was filed on July 29th of 2024, and it's still only in the second of 7 steps of pretrial action, the motion to dismiss decided phase. Basically, this is a complicated way of saying that the courts have not even determined if the claims of the plaintiff, the person, or in this case, persons that are filing the lawsuit, are valid, and that determination is very likely at least a year or 2 away. So naturally, that leads to the following questions. Who is suing? Who is being sued? How much money is at stake here? And most importantly for us, for what reason is this lawsuit even happening? The lawsuit as filed is called NZ et al. Versus Fenix International Limited et al. Et al. Just means and others. NZ doesn't appear to be a real person's name. Rather, it's an anonymous or pseudonymous collection of OnlyFans subscribers who are claiming that they have been harmed by OnlyFans and the specific named OnlyFans agencies in 3 ways, which I'll get into in just a moment. There's not actually a specific number of individuals attached to this case, but it's large enough for Class Action Fairness Act or CAFA jurisdiction, which means more than 100. In short, this is just a big group of disgruntled simps and gooners who realize that they've dropped a few grand talking to a random middle-aged Filipino guy instead of their busty goth waifu. For the remainder of this video, I'm going to call the plaintiffs the Goon Squad. The defendant, Fenix International Limited, is, as many of you probably know, OnlyFans' London-based parent company, and the et al. In this case is 8 named OnlyFans management agencies: Unruly Agency LLC, Boss Baddies LLC, Moxie Management, Behave Agency, Ash Agency, which belongs to Riley Reid, Content X, which is Bella Thorne's agency, Verge Agency, and Elite Creators. Creators Inc. and Siren Agency are cited in several documents, but they're not actually named as defendants in the suit. Right off the bat, you should notice something. These are huge agencies. All of them are based in the US, and many of them are attached to major adult industry celebrities. You can rest easy knowing that your Eastern European salary model operation based out of Dubai is probably not on their radar. 99% of agencies are not and will never be big enough for their existence to be acknowledged, let alone considered an appealing target for a lawsuit of this scope. As for the financial aspect of the lawsuit, again, an exact dollar amount isn't named. Rather, to qualify for CAFA jurisdiction, the damages must exceed a certain threshold, in this case, $5 million. Given that the case is being filed by over 100 terminal gooners who spent enough money on OF to think that it's worth filing a lawsuit, I would guess that the actual damages claimed are going to be much, much more than $5 million, given most of the named agencies make that much in a standard month of operations. Now, for the fun part. In my opinion, the most interesting part of this case are the claims themselves, the actual crimes that the plaintiffs are accusing the defendants of. Charge 1 is RICO, the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act. The Goon Squad says that OnlyFans and several named agencies formed a coordinated enterprise that used deceptive chatting to sell DMs and PPVs. In plain terms, fans were led to believe that they were talking one-on-one with creators when, allegedly, agency chatters were impersonating those creators to push purchases. Now, I know none of you would ever use chatters, and that we all do the ethical thing and force our models to sit at a laptop 24/7 personally, responding to thousands of customer messages at gunpoint, sweatshop style. But on the off chance that you do use chatters, it is absolutely not illegal to use chatters. So what is the actual charge here? The plaintiffs are saying that each deceptive DM or PPV sold is a wire fraud act. Wire fraud is basically a scheme to commit fraud with electronic payments. OnlyFans as a platform is being accused of knowing, or at least deliberately ignoring, that this was happening, and profiting via revenue share. The plaintiff's case here is that a pattern of these acts, along with coordination with OnlyFans, constitutes RICO. Really quickly, I'm going to explain what RICO is and why this charge in particular is both hilarious and almost certainly going to be dismissed. In the United States, we used to have a pretty serious problem with organized crime, like gangs, mobs, and mafias in our cities. If you've ever seen movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas, that's what those are based on. The Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act, or RICO, was passed in the 1970s to combat this gang activity, typically stuff like extortion, fraud, drug trafficking, etc. So their claim is basically that agencies and OnlyFans are acting as a coordinated gang. You come to me on the day of my daughter's OnlyFans hot launch and you ask for free pussy pics. Everyone in this business knows this is not the case. While I'm sure that some of the top agencies have open lines of communication with OnlyFans, it seems fairly obvious to me that OnlyFans in general does not provide any support for agencies. In fact, they do a lot to make our jobs harder. Their backend is notoriously hard to connect with and has no native API, which is why an entire market for third-party CRMs and OF-adjacent software exists. They basically offer no features that natively facilitate chatters or management of any kind, and I'm sure that this will be very easy to establish credibly in court. So why would these silly gooners even attempt to pursue this charge? If even a single RICO count survives and ultimately wins, damages can be trebled, which just means tripled, and the court could order practice changes. So clearly, the objective of the gooners is to both maximize the amount that they might win if this ever gets to court, and to force OF to change these practices so that only creators can talk to fans. However, I would say this is very unlikely to happen. The standards for establishing RICO are very, very high because, again, it's based on actual organized crime. And it would be extraordinarily difficult to prove that OnlyFans participated in a coordinated fraud scheme with agencies, short of establishing that communications occurred between OF and agencies that substantiate claims of a racketeering enterprise, and then subpoenaing those communications. Even if those communications occurred, which I very strongly doubt, that can't even happen in this phase of the trial unless the judge makes an exception and court orders it, which again is extremely unlikely.
Super Creator reached out to me asking me to test out their CRM along with their integrated AI chatbot, Izzy. I didn't expect much. I've been very skeptical of AI chatting. I assumed that LLMs would hallucinate and create continuity issues, that the conversations would be low quality, and most importantly, that an AI would never be able to outperform human chatters when it comes to sales, which is what matters most. And on all three of these counts, I was dead wrong. After completing the onboarding process, where Super Creator ingests every detail about your model from eye color to conversational style, I personally tested Izzy on a free page with over 80,000 subscribers, and I was absolutely blown away. Izzy not only flawlessly imitated the model's personality and texting style, it had context-sensitive conversations with zero hallucinations, with over 2,000 fans in a single day. And it sold more PPVs in that first 24 hours than I had sold on that page in the previous 3 months combined. And that's not a fluke. There are over 25,000 creators and agencies that are using Super Creator today, and Izzy has sold over $180 million of PPVs since its release just a few months ago. If you followed me for a while, you know that I only advocate for products that Milky actually uses and believes in, and Super Creator falls firmly into that category. So if you're an agency that's looking to dramatically cut chatting costs without sacrificing chat quality or revenue, Izzy is the solution, and I strongly recommend that you check it out today. And they're giving my viewers an insane deal. If you click the first link in the description and use promo code Francis at checkout, you will get 30% off plus 2,000 free AI messages to see for yourself just how powerful Izzy is. Now, back to the video.
Charge 2 is VPPA, the Video Privacy Protection Act. The Goon Squad alleges that the defendants knowingly disclosed subscribers' personal identifying information tied to specific purchases of video content. In other words, what they viewed or bought, without the level of consent that the law requires. It might be easiest to think of it like this. If a service links who you are to the exact videos that you watched or bought, and then shares that linkage improperly, VPPA could be triggered. The claim seeks statutory damages and fees, stuff like legal fees, punitive damages, and cost of therapy for falling in love with a Pakistani 50-year-old, and not just actual losses, aka the money that the gooners paid for the content. VPPA often appears in class action lawsuits for this reason. For this charge to stick, the Goon Squad has to prove all of the following. 1, that OnlyFans is a video distribution platform. It would be pretty hard to argue that they aren't, so we'll call this a win for Team Gooner. 2, the Goon Squad is a consumer, subscriber, a purchaser, or renter of that video service. They are, of course, so another win for Team Gooner. 3, the company knowingly shared the person's personal identifying information, or PII, plus specific videos with a third party. This is where the first sign of trouble appears for the Gooners. They would have to prove that OnlyFans knew that the purchases were being attributed to specific individuals, plus that they intentionally and knowingly shared that information with third parties in a way that is comprehensible to an ordinary person. That's a pretty big hurdle to clear. The fourth condition is no valid consent or exception that covers that disclosure. In this case, there is explicit language in the OnlyFans terms of service that clearly and unambiguously states that fans may in fact not be talking to third parties, and all fans have to sign those terms of service in order to even create an account on OnlyFans. The specific language is as follows. The fan acknowledges that third parties may assist creators in operating their accounts and in creator interactions. That seems pretty unambiguous to me. They're clearly telling you that you might be talking to someone who isn't the model during the course of normal communications. And something interesting here is that while this language is good for OF in that it establishes signed consent from the consumer of the content, it might also be a lever for the Goon Squad because they can point at that sentence and say, well, why would you include this if you weren't aware that it was happening? And this is exactly what's happening in pretrial proceedings, with both parties citing the terms of service and providing their own interpretations. So this charge is not totally cut and dry. Again, all 4 conditions must be met in order for this claim to stick. And based on what I see, that seems pretty unlikely. Not only based on the facts of this case, but how rarely VPPA claims seem to stick in general. In fact, in the last 10 years, I was only able to find 4 plaintiff wins in VPPA cases, and they weren't even in court. They were just small settlements that got paid out under $10 million to the plaintiffs. The third and final charge is Wiretap Act / CIPA style electronic communications claims. Here, the Goon Squad is saying that electronic communications were intercepted or used in ways that the law forbids, particularly where chatters allegedly stepped in without clear disclosure and messages were routed or handled for what is called a tortious purpose. In this case, deception to sell. Try to say tortious purpose 3 times fast. Pretty hard, huh? Think of an OnlyFans DM like a phone call. The Federal Wiretap Act bans intentionally listening in to the contents of a live electronic conversation while it's happening, or using or disclosing what was illegally captured. The fan thinks they're talking to the model, but the claim here is that the call is being routed to a third party who is secretly listening in without their consent. Here's what the Gooners would have to prove for this charge to survive dismissal. 1. An intentional interception of the contents of an electronic communication as it was transmitted. 2. That communication would have to be intercepted by someone who isn't allowed to. Either a true third party, like a vendor sniffing messages, or a party that's acting outside of the ordinary course, again for a tortious purpose, which defeats the usual consent or party exceptions. And third, with no valid consent. So let's take the typical scenario chatters probably face on a daily basis. All communication occurs on the OnlyFans platform, so there's no intentional interception. It's just the platform being used as intended. The subscriber has signed a terms of service that specifies that they might be talking to a third party that establishes that the chatter is able to do this since the fan has consented. And the chatter converses with the fan and sells them a piece of content that the fan requested. Would any of this constitute wiretap or other illegal activity? And the answer is, by nearly all interpretations of all precedent case law I could find, no. This is totally fine. The Federal Wiretap Act targets secret listening in on the contents of a live conversation by someone who isn't allowed to be there. In our scenario, the chatter is acting as the creator's agent on the same account, so they're a party to the conversation. The act has a party and consent carve-out, and the OnlyFans TOS disclosure strengthens that. Now, if the chatter, or let's say like a third-party tool or software that you use, secretly copies the text of the DMs in real time for a wrongful purpose, or it takes comms off the OnlyFans platform to run like a romance scam or something, a court could scrutinize that under the tortious purpose limitation, or it could fall under a different category of crime altogether. But as long as you're abiding by the platform terms of service and things stay in the OnlyFans DMs, unless and until this case goes to trial, and unless and until the Gooners win it, you are not doing anything unlawful by running a standard chatting operation. Which brings us to part 3. What can you do to protect yourself? So what does this mean for you as an OnlyFans model or management agency? First, if you're a model, there's no reason to worry at all. In fact, not a single part of this case involves or would impact you, and not a single individual model has been named as a defendant. Since a model is the intended recipient of communications, personal information, and so on with fans, if you're a solo creator, you truly do not have anything to worry about. If you're an agency, here's what you need to know. All signs seem to point towards this being a serious uphill battle for the Goon Squad. OnlyFans and the named agencies all have a really strong case that they didn't do anything unlawful at all, let alone anything that warrants charges of this severity. On top of that, there's been a recent development that's very favorable for those of you on Team OnlyFans. Between August and September of 2025, OnlyFans, the defense, told the court that plaintiffs cited non-existent or misquoted cases in multiple briefs. OnlyFans told the court that 11 of the 18 cited authorities in a plaintiff's reply brief were totally fabricated or misquoted or misdescribed facts, and the judge was asked to disregard the briefs and consider sanctions. It later came to light that these briefs were heavily drafted by AI and contained hallucinations with absolutely no basis in reality. The reason this matters is that in this stage of proceedings, the pre-trial motion to dismiss phase, this is where credibility matters the most. It is a tremendous setback for the Goon Squad because they have to provide explanations for this massive error and come up with new case law citations, which is going to delay the trial by weeks or maybe even months. Judges don't take this kind of thing lightly because it clogs up the already insane legal backlog. Court proceedings already take years, even if everything goes perfectly. So something as major as totally made up case citations are a huge no-no. Sanctions may come into play, which will almost certainly include the tainted filings being totally invalidated, even if they contained some factual claims, and can also include fees that are imposed by the court. Now, you might be asking, why? If it is so unlikely that they're going to win, are the Gooners bringing this case at all? And my guess is that there are 2 reasons. One is emotional. We all know who these guys are. They are some of the most pathetic, gullible people in existence. The definition of a mark and a simp. They have incredibly hollow, empty lives that are totally devoid of female warmth and affection, and finding out that they got scammed out of thousands of dollars by some model who they thought was in love with them might be a straw that breaks the camel's back type of scenario. And they want to take revenge on the people who they feel wronged them. Notice, it's not the model, it's the big faceless corporation and the evil agencies. Women are blameless angels. Always remember that. The second is a bit more rational. There's potentially a ton of money on the line. Remember, every single count of each of these 3 charges might be eligible for penalty. And if any RICO charges stick, the award to the Goon Squad is tripled, with hundreds of millions, potentially over $1 billion on the line. There is a massive financial incentive for them to pursue this case, no matter how unlikely it is that they succeed. But the reality is that even on the fraction of a percent chance that they do win and get awarded the absolute maximum, A, that amount means nothing to OnlyFans as a platform. It spits out billions of dollars a year and has very little overhead. And B, it'll be at least another year before this even has a chance to get past motion to dismiss. And in my opinion, based on the facts and other similar cases, I think it's very unlikely that any of these charges make it to the trial stage. If it does reach trial, that trial won't conclude until 2027 at the earliest. So the most likely scenario is that these unfortunate simps will spin their wheels, spend a ton of money on legal fees, and walk away with nothing. Or if OnlyFans and the named agencies think that it'll be cheaper than continuing litigation, they might offer to settle with the Goon Squad for a nominal amount. So what does this mean for you as an agency? Realistically, at least until and unless this case survives motion for dismissal, you don't need to change any of your business practices. It's much more likely that the OFM industry gets disrupted by AI companion sites or other similar products than by this case. But let's assume the absolute worst case scenario, that this does go to trial, that the Gooners come out victorious, and your agency starts looking like a juicy target for future class action cases. If you want to exercise an excess of caution, here are a few things that you can do today to protect yourself. First, leave the word chatting out of contractual language with your models. Don't ever explicitly mention that you provide chatting as a service in written communications. Instead, say things like post scheduling or page organizing or other obfuscating language, maybe even something like customer service. 2, create a legal entity outside of the United States that manages your model contracts. Interjurisdictional law is a fucking nightmare. You are a substantially less juicy target if the entity that the fans are attempting to sue doesn't exist in the same place as the fans themselves. It's a way bigger legal headache, and somebody would have to be insanely motivated and insanely wealthy to come after you if your organization is housed in, say, Dubai. And 3, if you want to be extremely careful, add language in the model's bio to the effect of, by messaging, you agree that trained human assistants may view and reply to your messages on the creator's behalf. You could even bury this language at the very bottom, maybe in like a really long DMCA disclaimer. So it just looks like boring text that 99.9% of fans will just skim over. I think this is probably the most bulletproof way to protect yourself, but obviously this does carry some risk of turning fans away. Hopefully, if you were anxious about this case, this video has helped alleviate some of that anxiety. I really don't think you have anything to worry about, but don't just take my word for it. Check the sources yourself. I have linked every docket, filing, and article that I referenced so that you can verify the facts and make your own judgment. If anything changes or I missed something, drop it in the comments and I'll pin corrections or updates. And if you found this video valuable and you want more news, explainers, and practical how-tos about the digital intimacy industry, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in the next one.